Amputee powered by James Robert Fitness, and this is episode 22 of my podcast. And today's guest, I've got Marc Steutel. He's the first team coach of Northumbria University men's basketball team, better known as Team Northumbria. So thanks again, Marc, for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So we talked briefly a little bit how you got into basketball. Can you explain to the listeners what were the initial steps for you getting into becoming a coach?
Yeah, I guess coaching was all, I kind of played the game from about the age of 14. And, I guess I'd always loved kind of whatever club I was at, kind of working with the younger kids and, just, I guess at the time I thought it was coaching, probably was just more kind of facilitation and, guess lack of a better term, babysitting, entertainment, that type of stuff. But I was lucky where one of my first coaches was a coach, Jimmy McGinn. He always got me involved in kind of like summer camps and half-term camps. So I was always playing on, whether it was under 16s or under 18s team at the time. He always used to get me involved in that, and it was something that I really enjoyed. People say that, but I just love the interaction, and particularly with kind of working with under 10s and so on and so on. I just really enjoyed it. So as I played, I moved around a few different places, and I think I'd obviously settled up in the Newcastle area, and I was playing for Team Northumbria at the time, and the coach of the programme had left just before the end of the season, and our programme is actually ran and delivered and managed by the Newcastle Eagles, so via service level agreement. So the Newcastle Eagles actually oversee and they run and deliver all of Northumbria men's and women's, and they just they'd kind of asked me as somebody who I was coaching the college academy team at the time, and they just I was kind of the captain of the team, and we were literally at the back end of the season they'd asked me if I could just kind of step into the end of the season and then it would get reviewed, to which I did, and we had a couple of tough games. Trying to play and coach is just for me it was impossible personally. And then in the summer, I was offered the full-time position with Northumbria, which it just kind of aided a lot of the other stuff that I was doing, like I say, the college academy stuff, and I was quite active in the region for kind of junior development, regional teams and area performance centres as it used to be known. So I felt like it aided all that stuff, and it was the next step for me. And then since then, I've just kind of stuck with it. So that was my first year, which was 2011, 2012, in terms of with Northumbria, and I've just kind of moved on from there.
And in terms of player development and for the kids in the local area that you've probably seen develop, is there a pathway for them to go on in terms of getting through the colleges and looking at possibly going to Northumbria University and staying in that pathway, obviously from college level, looking at if the person had aspirations to possibly get to play for the Eagles down the line? Is there something of that nature in place?
Yes, yeah, there is. I think our pathway is something that's something that we're proud of from kind of top of the club to the younger age groups. There's been a lot of people that have probably been instrumental in kind of developing that pathway. I think it's always it's such a relevant kind of question, James, and it's such you probably open up a whole other issue, which is good, because of the players that have been around at that pathway and how long they've been playing at a certain age group. Is it the right thing for a player to step up? Is it the right thing for a player to step down? And when you look at there's a guy from kind of Sports Coach UK, Stuart Armstrong, who talks a lot about talent, and I went to a clinic a few years back, and he was talking about like the iceberg model and what people see at the top, above water, and obviously a lot of the the other factors that are underneath it, social factors, family influence, mental capacity, physiological, all these other type of things that kind of make up an athlete to progress through to the highest level. And with ourselves, the highest level is the Eagles. So in my experience, I've been with the club because I actually started off with the club as a kind of a foundation coach, a community coach, in 2000 and I want to say seven. My memory serves me right. I think about 2007. So I'm getting on to nearly 10 years, kind of like full-time employment with the club. So I've seen a lot of players who have progressed through. Now, whether players have actually went through and made a full-time, kind of an impact that we all would have liked at the BBL level is another question. Because we've had junior guys that maybe step up to the BBL team at the age of 18, 19. And I guess the question is whether those guys, are they ready to play? And what happens to them at that stage, and then the balance of minutes in the BBL versus minutes of stepping down. At the time it was Division 2, now it's obviously Division 1. The governing body, Basketball England, influenced that. So even from last year to this year, they've reduced the age from under 25 with British player movement to under 23 with British player movement. So that's a decision that they've made. So we have the pathway. We have structure. From a player can start playing basketball through our Hoops of Health program at under 10s. They can progress through to go to one of our satellite clubs, which are based all around the Tyne and Wear area. And there's a lot of successful clubs there with participation. They can then progress on to our National League structure, which we call the School of Excellence, both male and female. And then the idea is, as they're progressing up to under 18 School of Excellence, they would go to one of our partner colleges, to one where we're delivering kind of academy level basketball, and then hopefully get the entry requirements to progress onto the university. It's not something that we've got 100% right. It's not, because one of my biggest things is I have to be competitive in the university league and in Division 1. I have to recruit nationally and sometimes internationally, where it would be fantastic if the majority of the team was made up of local players. So I think that is the dream, and hopefully we've got to keep working to get there. But in terms of the structure itself being there, it's there, and then we've just got to keep reviewing it and tweaking it and working on it, short term, medium term, long term.
But like you say, in terms of player recruitment, it's at the end of the day Division 1, and obviously, what is it, Premier in terms of university, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in the books Premier. Yeah.
It would be a case of your job at the end of the day is to get results. So you need to obviously get the best players you can to keep yourself in that position.
Yeah, nail on the head. Nail on the head, mate. And this is where I kind of I love the level that I coach at, because it's a development slash results business. It is, and somebody asked me a kind of few years back about what are our goals at Northumbria, and essentially there's two: to compete at the highest level we can in every competition, with a particular focus on the university side, because the university is massive in funding our program, running our program, administering our program, and that the university are very vocal on how they want to be judged in university sports. So this past year we finished 8th with all sports, but in terms of books points, we actually finished first in the country across our 3 men's teams and our 2 women's teams. We actually had more books points than any other universities. So that they're really pleased with that. But I think, as you say, the university are big on student experience. They're big on making sure that these athletes come in and have the best possible chance to be successful. But ultimately, we're judged on results. And I guess with the cyclical nature of university sports, out of all the years I've been here, I've only really had kind of one really challenging year in terms of results. And the university and the club kind of stuck with me, and which was reassuring, because it was a challenging year, and obviously you start asking yourself questions at the back of your head about where the what happened, and at our level it can be such fine margins. It really can. It can be player recruitment, as much as you get to know somebody throughout the recruitment process and you work with them until they get here, and you're 3-4 weeks in and you're battling and competing and you're trying to test them and challenge them. You really don't get to know somebody until you go through the course of the season. So, I mean, yes, it's recruitment is a massive part of the job, and making sure that you get kind of good people who are able to buy into the system. And when I say the system, I don't mean what offense we're running or what defense we're running. I mean the environment and the culture of the club and the approach to training and the getting the processes right and all those types of things. And that's where recruitment becomes key. So I'm very lucky when I have a recruiting class that maybe has 3 or 4 core guys in it that are able to stay the course and move on, and then it becomes a really player led culture. My first couple of years, I wanted to. I don't know, for lack of a better term, I tried to create the most challenging environment we could have, and I was very kind of confrontational with a lot of players. Simply in a basketball kind of challenging them sense, and nothing that was other than, what I thought was the right thing to do at the time based on my experience. And, I think we still have that, and we still hold each other accountable. But I'm lucky where even this current season, I've got a lot of guys that have known me a long time, been with me a long time, and are able to make it a player-led culture. So that's really positive from my standpoint.
And then there's the question, like I think I brought up off air a little bit, obviously with you say with player recruitment.
Hmm.
What do you have to kind of put in place a plan of, say, over that 3 year cycle in terms of what you want to put in place? Because obviously for the listeners that aren't from the UK, obviously we've only got, well, depending on the course, generally most students are at university for 3 years, whereas that's not the case in, say, the US, where they've, well, in theory that they're going to be there for 4 years.
Hmm.
Be that the exception of the one and dones
Hmm.
who are looking to progress, obviously, to the NBA.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
to come back to that point, obviously, to look at more at the UK in depth to that question, do you kind of have to put a strategy in place and looking at macro cycling in terms of doing a plan for 3 years and then breaking it down from there?
Yes, yeah, essentially. We plan every year, year by year, but then you look at kind of your long-term recruits with that as well, and people who are, you know that people are 2-3 years away, and you try and build that relationship with those athletes 2-3 years away. You mentioned the States there, James, and it's so relevant in our game. Uh, the reality is, any British kid who is 16, 17 years old and is 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" plus, who the majority of people are competing for, the reality is, if they're at national team level or they're at top 25 in the country level, the majority of them are looking to go abroad. With the States being the number one destination, and over the past few years, there's been a trend with people going to Europe as well. We're talking about the top 25, I would say, but definitely the top 12, particularly in that category of that height. It's extremely difficult to try and keep British guys in the country. Now, I'm not a coach who says like you have to come to us because it's the only option. Because for some people, it is the right thing to go to the States. Not for everybody, and there's this stigma that every British kid needs to go to the States to develop. And I think a lot of the kids get blinded by the lights, if you like, where they see, the US. It's the best. It's this and it's that. And a lot of the athletes that go out there don't really do their due diligence, in terms of looking at the program, the coach, the philosophy, the system, the town, all these factors that can lead into whether an athlete's going to be successful out there. And I guess the education of this has got better. Maybe over the past 5 years it has got better, but there's still this stigma of, I'm going to go to the States first, and then I'll look at British universities second. And the amount of athletes that contact me around June, July, August, and they're trying to get a September start where, obviously the UCAS process, January the 15th is kind of our entry deadline for undergrads, and then you go through to the clearing, whereas for postgraduate, a little bit more flexibility. But honestly, it's amazing. They get set on, I'm going to go to the States, and if it's the right thing, and there have been some examples of where it has been the right thing for British guys to go to the States, I would say that I think that there's more stories in my experience of where it hasn't been the right thing, where people have went there with aspirations to go and play high levels in Europe, and they've literally, because for one reason or another, they've completed 3-4 years in the States, but then they've come back and they've played, Division 2, England, Division 1. They might have sat on the bench for a BBL team. And I guess the argument would be, is that the quality of the player? Is it the quality of the coaching? Is it the quality of the leagues? And there's all these other things. But I really, really think that there are certain institutions in the UK, basketball-wise and academically, that are strong and can offer a solid alternative to the States. And it has to be looked on individual case-by-case basis. But it's something that I'm obviously kind of, the last few years I've been, working with. And listen, I've had, I mentioned to you before, the academy. I've had players that I've facilitated, to go to the States because it's been the right thing for them. And as much as, you're a coach and you work with somebody and you would like to see that journey all the way through, they've done 2-3 years with ourselves at our academy, and it was the right thing for that individual to go to the States, and we've supported and facilitated that. And I'm not saying it's not. It's not the one model fits all, and I think that's one of the biggest kind of misconceptions out there for young people who think, I want to go and play basketball, I want to combine it with my studies, I have to go to the States. It's a business. There's coaches out there that are. I read something not too long back about the average number of jobs that a head coach will have in the state is they have to be prepared to move 7 times to be able to get a long-term head coaching position, and that could be going from North Dakota to Tennessee, up to California, over to Ohio. Like literally they're moving cross country. So because of it is a business out there, a coach goes in, they recruit a British kid. He has a season where they're below 500 in terms of games, and he's out the door, and somebody else is in, and you don't fit my philosophy, you don't fit my system. I'm going to bring my new players in. There's just that's one example of however many there can be. Now listen, the top level that are going to big schools, ACC schools, Pac-10 school, all those type of stuff. No problem. Big East schools, that's best of luck to you. People that are going there on. A former player of mine went to Rice University, which regarded as probably the #1 engineering university in the world. So he for his later life, he's going to be set up. He would probably, I don't want to talk on his behalf, but he would probably tell you that basketball-wise, he would reflect on that decision. I think, it's been great for his life, but somebody who was extremely kind of talented, he would look at that again, basketball-wise, and say, was it the best thing from a strictly basketball standpoint? And we don't know. He's going to be set up for life because of the quality of his degree, which is the other argument of it. But I just think it's a relevant question that I don't think we get right generally as a country. There's certain places that do. Barking Abbey is the regional institute, and in particular Lloyd Gardner and James Veer, who are down there. I think they do. I think that they're telling the kids the right messages. They're telling them how competitive it is. They're exposing them to that level by bringing coaches over and actually taking teams over to the US. And they've got a track record of development and what's best for the individual. And they've also been proactive in signposting some of their kids to British institutions as well. And this is something that I've always looked at. In Northumbria, realistically, for anybody of size, so like I say, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" plus, I'm really kind of competing for second tier kids, if that makes and that's not a knock on them. It's because the first level are, I'm going to States and I'm set and that's it. So it's just about kind of looking at that and then making sure that, and what would have to happen to break that cycle, we would have to start showing and proving that people can go to a British institution, they can develop just as effectively, or if not more so effectively, and that they can then move on and make a living out of the game just as somebody from the States could, or if not better. So it's that, until that starts becoming a consistent message and a consistent, there's evidence there that can happen. I guess, that there's some of the battles that we're going to face.
But in terms of one thing you probably didn't touch upon there is in terms of if we look at it solely at university level, in terms of funding, you're already on the back foot in terms of how much money the institution gives to the sport from that sense.
Yeah.
So it's something that British universities have obviously brought about. Well, I think it was in terms of my university, but for just argument's sake, I think they brought it in like scholarship type things. Or when was I at university? It would have been about 2005 that I first saw things like that. But then in terms of scholarship, £1,000 is nice, but in terms of what an American university can offer you is obviously, if it's say for Division One, for argument's sake, if you're good enough, you're going to get a full ride. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing talking to Alex Woomy on a previous podcast. He was saying, oh, it's all well and good, kids thinking, oh, okay, I don't have to pay to go to school, but at the end of the day, it's probably some things, even in this country, they probably may not think of it as, oh, well, I'm going to get a full ride. All I have to worry about is sport. Well, it doesn't work that way in the US. Obviously, there's I don't know if it's the same in the UK in terms of eligibility, but obviously in the US, you need to keep at a certain grade point average to be able to play.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it might be termed as you're going as an athlete, but technically you are still student athlete, and the first word in that sentence is still student.
Yeah. 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 I think I get another relevant point, mate, on two fronts. I guess that touched on the first one, and the latter point first about the GPA and again, it's not, I don't want to sit here and look like it's kind of, I'm bad mouthing the state. I'm not. I support what's best for an individual. There have been numerous stories, of individuals where the state hasn't been the right option. And again, that stuff I said before about blinded. Now looking at the GPA, I guess that's, again, it's good. And I mean, when I was playing, I played in a high school in Ohio for a year, so I kind of had some experience of being out there and actually going through the process of being recruited for colleges as well, as a student athlete, and everyone's talking about the GPA stuff, and I was a capable student. I wasn't the best student. I wasn't the worst. I was a capable student. Um, GPAs, you'll see where if we're investing $40,000 into you, you have to maintain your GPA. Of course you do. What happens to the athletes there who are looked as athletes first and students second? Well, what happens is, for lack of a better term, they'll get spoon fed. They will get spoon fed by enough people there to maintain that GPA. And they'll have support workers, mentors, blah 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 blah, that will that will make, and it's a good thing because ultimately the athlete's coming out of it with a degree. But is that setting them up for later life, post basketball, world of work, managing deadlines, or all those types of things that are important? And again, that's not everybody, but I do know that happens. On the other side of it, the GPA is there. It's good if people are disciplined and they're able to work with it. That'll work also. I've actually, when I was coaching the academy and I had some guys who were A-level students, some guys who were BTEC students. I had some guys that missed some deadlines consistently, and I just pulled them from the program. So although there's not a national thing over here, it's something I've done to try and help them
Mhm.
with like life lessons. The finance one is, it's a really good point. Athletes can go to the States and get scholarships of £35,000, £40,000 tuition, accommodation, food, etc. Blah blah blah, and you know that's them set, and they're coming out with a good degree and no debt. Athletes over here, like you say, you know, you mentioned £1,000 figure. There's a misconception that, particularly at Northumbria, you know, we're people, the amount of people that contact me and ask for a free ride and a full scholarship. So you know, I go back to them and say, you know, what is your interpretation of a full scholarship? And they're saying, you know, cover my tuition fees. That's £9,000.
The university's not going to do it.
No, you know, it doesn't happen. But because again, we have a good program that's linked in with, you know, the most successful professional club. We play at a £30 million sports centre. We have a very professional program that I'm proud of, but we're still not able to offer, you know, multiple guys. And that point that you said before, this is so relevant. It's a very fine line between investing somebody who's going to come in and develop and know that maybe by their third year they're going to be a key player, but I've still got to be able to win in year one and year two of that player's cycle. So, and that's where the balancing act comes. Where, you know, if I can get players who can come in and make an impact straight away, fantastic. But then I've got to look at guys and say, well, the reality of the majority of people who come in and make an impact are probably not going to be undergraduates, because if they were, they'd be in the States or they'd be elsewhere. And then, I mean, the finance thing. This is where people, you know, and I understand it as well. When I was at university, I was on the TAS scheme. You know, I'm sure you know it, Jim, but you know, the Talent Athlete Support Scheme. And it was when basketball was put on it for the first time. So I received, I think I received two £500 payments from TAS itself, but it was about the support services, it was about the strength and conditioning, it was about the nutrition advice, the access to a sports psychology, paying for more court time, all these things that Northumbria actually does. And this is where people have to look at it and say, I want to go and develop, I'm going to go to Northumbria because I get access to £30 million facilities. We have our strength and conditioning suite is, you know, world class. We have a sports psychologist, we have a sports nutritionist, we have performance analysis, we have physio. You know, we have all these things that are really important. You know, that we class as support services on top of your coaching and on top of, you know, the other type of stuff. So that's where that, coupled with some of our players that do get some support, you know, and some of our players will receive a little bit of financial support, and we're not talking kind of, you know, life-changing figures, but we're talking figures that might mean the difference between them having to get a part-time job and them not, for example, and that again, because of the schedule, you know, they're at uni, let's say 12 hours a week, maybe, if that's, you know, roughly around there. And then their basketball commitments can be up to, you know, 20 to 25 hours a week when you take into account individual workouts, team meetings, scouting sessions, video sessions, strength and conditioning, massage, team training, games, you know, all that type of stuff. You add it up, it becomes like a full-time job. You know, it does. It becomes, you know, 37 hours a week with the studying and stuff. So we want to look after our athletes as best as we can, and it's that fine balance of saying, this is the scholarship pot that we've been allocated. How can we best use it to be successful now? Because success breeds success, and then more people want to come, and that's a good thing for us, and we want to be more competitive. But we also want to offer opportunities to British guys. I mean, last year my team had we finished, I think we finished fifth in the league. We made two semi-finals in Division 1, and we got through to the Bucks final. Now, in the National League, we were all British. You know, that was something I was extremely proud of. We had 12 British guys. Everybody was under the age of 25, apart from my captain, who played with us previously. He went away and then came back. So he was the only one over the age of 25. And we were competing in Division 1, where, you know, teams are bringing in Americans, Spaniards, you know, foreign players. So this year, I have 12 players registered National League. I have one US player, 11 British guys, and again, one of those British guys is over the age of 25, and everybody else is under the age of 25. So you know, we're trying to get that model correct, and we're trying to make sure that the British guys have an opportunity to play whilst being successful now. And And it's that balance it is. But I mean, the things that you said on there, the financial impact of an individual saying, "I'm going to go and take out student finance for £9,000." It's something that we have to deal with.
And in terms of what's one I didn't bring up is obviously college sport is obviously a business as well in itself,
Yeah.
because obviously they've got, or be it basketball, American football, uh, be it one of the other sports, that's shown on national television, either regionally or in most cases with basketball and American football, it be nationally. So the institution is obviously making money from the networks for broadcasting that, whereas in the UK, well, I don't see that ever happening in the near future in terms of say, for example, the BBC getting behind it and showing live coverage of sport on, say, a weekend, for example, because it hasn't got that traditional element of it being part and parcel of society. And then obviously, if we come back to it and look at the obviously the American psyche of it, it is in their DNA of uh, high school sports being on a Friday night, the college sports being on a Saturday, and the professional sports on a Sunday. And
Mhm.
obviously, that is the progression route. If somebody wants to succeed in, say, basketball or American football, that's the route they want to aspire to. Is I want to go from playing on a Friday to playing on a Sunday.
Mhm. Uh, yeah, we've got to, I think you said their media presence at all levels, and it's going to start with our professional league. It's going to start with the BBL in terms of their media presence and that growing interest in the game, and then hopefully filtered down. I mean, books, they do a good job of kind of promoting the sport. Um, I think they made a terrible decision maybe 45 years ago for basketball in particular, where the final eight competition was a premier competition in the British basketball calendar. So it was always at Sheffield at the EIS in
Mm-hmm.
Sheffield, and it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday competition. So you started with 8 teams on the Friday, and by the Sunday you had your winner, your runner-up, your third, fourth, all the way through to eight. And it was the top 4 teams in the north, top 4 teams in the south, um, go through into playoffs, and then so be it. We get the winner. And Bucks a few years back, against the advice of the basketball advisory group,
Oh.
decided to then keep it as the final eight competition, or Super Eight, or Elite Eight, whatever they term it, and just play the quarter-final and the semi-final, and then you play the final on what they call Bucks Big Wednesday, where they have all of the finals together in every sport at a certain venue on one day. And I think this has been the third year of Bucks Big Wednesday now, and I still think it's atrocious. Honestly, I do. I just talking with like Sam Neater at Hoopsfix and different people. The final eight was on. It was a highlight of the basketball calendar, um, and as much as kind of the BBL playoff final is, and I think this past year, off the top of my head, I think how many people did they 10,000, 11,000 people there? I think roughly at the they were to, so when these events are promoted and marketed correctly, you can get great coverage. And it was great that this year both the men's and the women's final was on the BBC, albeit through the red button, but it was on the BBC. So you can do that, and again, just bringing it back into like our personal one about university basketball, the final eight, the coverage for that was good. There was even times when the games would get live streamed. You would have 8 men's teams, 8 female teams there by default. They're bringing their own supporters and
Mm-hmm.
all this type of stuff. And it was just, for me, it was a premier competition in the country on the basketball calendar, and Bucks just decided to go away from it. And I think it's been a poor decision. And that's something that I guess is my thoughts on it. But you're right, James. Nail on the head. Media presence, media coverage, and the reality is, it's never going to be the level where it is in the States because of, I guess, their approach to sports from high school level. all the way through, and it's they have a different approach. You mentioned the Friday night sports, the high school. That's something that again I was lucky to have experience with, and it shuts the town down. And it has such a wider impact on the community. Your stature in society can be based on whether your son or daughter is playing varsity sports. It's really embedded within their culture. Um, where we're our main sport is with football, and bloody Sunday league football, and people who get involved in it and so on. So we're always going to be fighting that battle, but hopefully, if we're able to get better homegrown players coming through and increasing the impact of the top league, hopefully that would impact it. I mean, that's something that I know the BBL have always looked at in terms of their strategy, but the it's an interesting debate is maybe the amount of import players in our top league and the amount of opportunity in our top league compared to other European leagues. And I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but for example, in other European countries, certain nations have the fact that in your top league you have to have two homegrown players under the age of 23 on the floor at all times. So then, by default, the homegrown players become more of a necessity than your import players, and your homegrown players should be able to link better into the local community, which should then raise aspiration, and it should raise interest and media coverage, and so our professional league um, does have carry massive weight for increasing media coverage, and I know for a fact certain teams have fantastic media presence. I think the Eagles, Leicester, sorry, there's a guy there does a great job in terms of their media presence, and that's growing. So it's about kind of asking what doesn't work, growing that, and then hopefully we get it to the point where it is. It's back on TV screens like it was a few years back on Sky, and I think that'd be important. It would go to help it, but I think that's always going to be one difference that's from the US.
But in terms of the media, it's you could say to a certain extent, or this is my opinion, they are somewhat at fault in terms of the coverage any sport gets outside of football because it's kind of gone from, or we'll say 20 years ago, it'd be one live game a week to you
Mm-hmm.
can watch football any day of the week now on television. So it's a
Yeah.
case of media is somewhat at fault because obviously they've chucked so much money at football,
Mm-hmm.
whereas if they'd maybe, I don't know, distributed it evenly, because they say, oh, football's the most popular thing, but it's that you're saying that because obviously that's the people that watch it, but from grassroots level, and I think talking to other people, basketball is one of those things within in a city. It's probably the more popular of any sport because, to a certain extent, you only need you only need the ball. But talking to the likes of John Amici on that I did on a previous podcast, he brought up the fact obviously it's getting dearer and dearer to rent court space. Obviously, it's not just having the ball; it's you've got to get shoes,
Mm-hmm.
um, hire out court time. If you want to get better, have to look at obviously going from not just 2 hours a week. You're gonna have to do look at 6 hours a week, and it was this aspect of he went to his local leisure centre in London just to find out well how much is it going to cost to hire out the court space. So he asked in terms of the badminton court, oh, I want to hire out three badminton courts for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
How much would it cost? And obviously the leisure centre said X amount for this, and they were kind of quite inquisitive as to why do you want free badminton courts? Oh, I want to play basketball for 2 hours. Oh no, it's going to
Yeah.
cost this. It's going to cost this much. And you're thinking, why does it cost more to hire out for basketball when at the end of the day you're still hiring out the same how would I say it?
Same space.
the same space within the leisure centre. So I don't know if it's something I didn't ask him on air. Was is it a case of um, the local authorities looking at basketball on a pedestal in terms of obviously using America as the model? Obviously, the NBA is they've got their low well they're high earners in terms of sports, and then coming back and putting it on people within the UK, when in all reality it is the American the American model is probably a different beast altogether, because technically, in all honesty, we say footballers are high earner payers. Most that if you actually brought the American sports into uh, context, the footballers don't earn anything compared to, say, I think the highest earners are actually in baseball. You're thinking so,
Yeah,
and majority of that, in all honesty, they don't play. They're not playing for a lot of the time. Be it okay, defensively they'll be out in the field, but you in all reality, you've obviously got those three outs. So in that order, well, maybe on average, say 5, 6 players might be at bat at one time. So not all the players are playing, and they're on exorbitant amounts of money. So
hmm
kind of coming back to that point, it's the obviously the local authorities aren't helping to progress a
hmm
sport that is probably at grassroots, probably one of the, if not the most popular. So it's kind of not helping itself to be able to facilitate people to progress on that route if they perceive a future within that sport.
yeah. Funding is a like you've touched on, is a whole other can of worms. It is. But it's critical. In any sport, but particularly in basketball. You look at, I mean, participation rates. You touched on. You said kind of like, the accessibility for inner city kids, James. It's a sport that, because of the nature of the sport, and I guess some of the culture that surrounds the sport, and it can attract people from such a diverse and such a wide background, and there's been, beyond however many case studies of people that, basketball has been such a positive vessel. I mean, I know, for example, there was a player. I won't, I don't want to mention the player's name, but he'd had serious academic. He was inner city kid in London, had serious academic issues. On the border of being expelled. He went on to be one of our best national team players because of somebody who worked with him, helped him harness his skills, his athletic ability, his mindset, his temperament, and yet he went on to captain our national team. That's just one example of how many there are because of the sport. So, I mean, the sport itself has, because of the nature of it, the dynamics, all that type of stuff, it should be one of the most accessible. But, like you said, John Amici and other, that it is right that there's funding barriers there. I mean, I was lucky when I was of a younger age. I wrote a letter, and I've got a box of stuff, like memorabilia stuff, that I keep. And I remember I wrote a letter at school to our local MP, asking whether I could use facility hire for free, because it was the only local court. And he actually wrote back, and he wrote to the local council on my behalf. And I think he didn't get it free, but it was something like I had to pay a token fee of maybe £2 an hour or something, for me to go in and work out. And, like you say, that it goes back to the level of coaching, level of organisation. An under-14s player over here that needs to, if you look at like long-term athlete development, and like the 10,000 hours model that, Dr. Isvan Barley came up with, and all this stuff that other sports have now interpreted. If you start at about 11 years old and you go up to 21, and the 10,000 hours works out roughly at about 18 and a half to 20 hours, somewhere in that region, a week, for the long-term athletic development. Which 11-and-a-half-year-old is going to be competing for 18 hours a week, and that can be holistic development, I guess. So it's, technical sessions, tactical sessions, games, but 18 hours a week for that age over 10. And this, the 10,000 hour model is for podium athletes to be able to go and, to compete at the best of their ability. So to do that, funding and accessibility is key, and we don't have it. Linked into the States, I mean, one of the best things when I was out there, the coach gave me a set of keys to the gym,
Mm-hmm.
so I could go in at any time of day, any time of night, and play. Over here, that doesn't happen. There's just that many examples of people that are able to not only just go and progress, get to the elite level, but people that are going to learn fantastic life skills and be like, functioning members of our society positively. Do you know what I mean? Like, and like you said, in the city stuff, the difference of going in and accessing a basketball session or going out and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. It's crazy. In terms of the money, the last funding cycle from Sport England, which obviously is big on funding, kind of participation, and then that funding goes into governing bodies. Usually, they obviously reduced funding that was paid directly to Basketball England, and increased funding to a company called Reach and Teach, which is a London-based company, because they had a really positive track record of participation, and throughout their program, proving that they had sustained participation. I think it was over a minimum of 6 week period. Don't quote me on it, but I think it was over a minimum of 6 week period, because they'd had a track record of participation and growing the game, and their athletes then moving on. Obviously, last cycle of UK sport funding, basketball received zero, because of, I guess, based on previous performances, and from a UK sport thing, can we invest in individual sports that have higher medal potential, or can we invest in team sports? And obviously with kind of London 2012, and the money that was spent on the build up to that, and the fact that how a lot of people would suggest that we underperformed, that's had a massive impact on it as well. So funding is key, and there are very few centres nationally, very few places where anybody can go and access basketball, and not only just a kid going in, but then the next thing is coaching. The coaching structure that we have, and the people that have access to young people and can help influence them and shape them and mould them and develop them. It's not at the required level. It's not. And you get people that don't know how to coach, don't have the right experience, don't have the right qualifications. They end up becoming really key stakeholders in young people, and it's just a never-ending cycle. So funding for access to facilities and funding for coaching is just critical to grow the game. And at the minute, it doesn't look like that's moving positively. It doesn't.
And there's something you touched upon, obviously, with your experiences, obviously, of playing in the US, in terms of the coach giving you a set of keys to practice whenever you can. It's kind of, I think John Amici touched upon it a little bit in the podcast I did with him, and he was saying, obviously, not just in the US but in Europe, they focus on those fundamental skills, and they're able to do it, say, shoot a 18-footer with their eyes closed. Whereas I don't know, and obviously being we'll use the point guard as the example. Obviously, having the handles to be able to look up and see the bigger picture.
Mm.
Do you think it's something in the UK that we focus too much on the aesthetics of basketball? Obviously, the showboating aspect of it, in terms of obviously dunks, trying to, what's the word I'm trying, like crossovers and
Yeah,
things like that, and
yeah,
trying to put the person on their ass, in terms of, instead of
yeah,
doing the fundamentals
yeah.
properly.
Yes, in some sense. I think kids are. Listen, again, it goes back to the coaching. It does. It really goes back to what is effective coaching, and people having the right experience and the right qualifications to coach young individuals. It does. If you let's go and pick a random junior game this weekend. Let's go and watch it, and 90% of the game is going to be layups or 3 points. Like, it's going to be head down, fast break. I'm going to go and score a layup quickly. Is there going to be? And listen, I'm talking stereotypically here because there are a lot of good people in good programs that are trying to change it, but there are also a lot of people who aren't. And unless we get on board with a national system and people be held accountable in this national system, it's not going to change. As say junior basketball, right? I've got the biggest kid in the gym who is, I don't know, 6'6", 6'7", but potentially has had a faster maturation rate. So he's, maybe he's done growing and that's it now. Okay, well, we're going to go and stick him at the basket, and he's a 5-man for us, particularly like under 14s level, 6'4" kid, under 14s. Okay, well, he's going to go and play the 5. That's all we're going to teach him. That's all we're going to, because he's going to help us win now. And at the end of this under 14 season, as a coach, I'm going to go and get a professional job. No chance, it's just not going to happen. But we're going to help. That's what's going to help them win now. Okay, well, that same 6'4" person is 6'4" at the age of 19. He now has to play against 2 and 3 men, and he hasn't got the skill set to do it, so he's dropped out of the game, or he hasn't been coached appropriately. The showboating fun, stuff that you were talking about. Yes, I think that can be a part of it, but again, I think that links back into coaching and highlight plays and so on. It's probably again, the emergence of Hoops Fix. Over the past so many years, Sam does a tremendous job at growing the game and growing interest in the game, and the amount of hours he's put in. I've actually, when he did his Hoops Fix All-Star game, I coached one of the games, and I have a ton of respect and time for him, and understand it. But it's amazing again the amount of kids that talk about trying to get on Hoops Fix, and that's not going to be with a jump stop and up and under. It's going to be with a highlight play that he can put on his website. Again, I'm not bad-mouthing it. I'm not, because he's went and done something that was missing, and he's done it off his own back. And he is the other side of it that maybe people don't see behind the scenes is his links into like parliament groups and all that type of stuff, where he's really kind of done a lot of work on that side. But I think Hoopfix is great because it gives kids that outlet, and it really it increases coverage. But then again, if a coach doesn't have enough understanding, or isn't qualified enough, because qualifications are key too. We have to. A friend of mine, and a guy who's a tremendous coach, I mentioned it before, James Veer. He spent time in Canada, and he was talking to me about their development system for coaches in Canada and how long it takes for coaches to actually be appropriately qualified at level 2 and at level 3. Over here, you can get your level 2 qualification, which means I can go off and head coach in 4 days, and I can go and do that in 4 days, and now I'm entrusted to go and be a head coach of an under 15s National League team, under 16s. And it makes no sense, because you get the people who do that are, whether it's a player's parent who's super invested, great, they should be a volunteer. They're people that we need in the sport, but you have to train them appropriately, and you have to mentor them appropriately, because then they will then feed back into our kids. They have direct impact with our kids, and you like the showboating, the fundamentals, the being able to jump stop, being able to pass off both hands. It should improve. And I know there are, there are certain people and certain coaches that do that effectively, and they're the coaches that I try and work with to recruit their athletes into Northumbria, from a personal standpoint. But there are a lot of coaches out there that don't do that, and don't kind of, they're very short term thinking. There's another player who I know. I was lucky enough to, when I first started, I was kind of a volunteer assistant coach for the England under 16 team, and it was the 93 born generation, so they were the first generation to win promotion out of Division B to Division A, with like Devon Van Oostrum, Joe Hart, and these types of players. And there was a player who was on that team who was 6 foot, and he was being played as a 3/4 for his club at 6 foot, because he was lightning quick, we could put him on a wing and he could go and score, and that was it. Well, the kid's 6 foot. He's never, he needs to learn how to be a point guard, how to be a two guard, and I know that he's spent most of, and he's somebody who I worked with a lot after that tournament, and it's about, he's done a tremendous job. But to be fair to him, to give him the best possible chance, that should have been something that was happening at the age of 13, at the age of 14, and why specify him in a position at that age when, like, there's so many factors onto how he's gonna develop, how he's gonna grow, and there's just, ultimately for me, it's, the stuff that you mentioned, it's coaching, and I was privileged where our governing body did. I was nominated to do the FIBA Europe coaching certificate, which was a 3 year qualification through FIBA, and I was with 67 coaches from all of the governing bodies and federations, and there was another English coach, Steve Bucknell, who obviously first English guy to play in the NBA. He was another English coach on the course with me, and it was amazing to get an insight into their their workings. Belgium, Latvia, Lithuania, Spain, Portugal, all these different nations, basketball nations, and just to talk with them about things that their governing bodies do, things that their clubs do, things that their national systems do, and to understand how as a nation we can catch up and learn from them. And a lot of it, the majority of it, comes down to access to facilities. Of course that's key, and having specific youth centres for basketball, not where, well, I can get a basketball session in, or I can sell it to badminton for, you know what I mean, or for that's key. But the ultimate one for me was coaching. 100% it was coaching, and coach education and coach development, and that's something that they need to improve.
And then in terms of coaching, it's one I brought up previously in other podcasts. What is your take on, say, for example, making, how do I say it? From an offensive standpoint, this notion of players or coaches wanting everybody to have a piece of the pie, instead of looking at, for example, from a defensive aspect of the game, you're trying to make the team go away from plan A.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on coaches and players that, I'm not getting the ball today, and kind of moan about it, when at the end of the day, offensively, if the system is working, you don't know, you would have thought you would not go away from it.
They won't play at Northumbria. In its simplest form, they won't. It's a team sport. You wanna take more shots, be a better shooter. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a team sport where people have to buy into team concepts. So just linking it, and I'm not saying that we get things right, we get things wrong. Of course we do, as a club. But I am proud of the way that our club approaches the game, and I have philosophy on it, and the culture and the environment is key to those things. And addressing offensive and defensively, we've always tried to. It's the utopia for us as a club. It doesn't happen. Is we want to get 6 guys in double figures, where possible. And when we've had success over the course of the season and in different situations, we've done that. We've just played a game today and we've had 5 guys in double figures, so we just fell short. But I'm not saying that's the right thing. I'm just saying it's a nice target that would help emphasise and reinforce, like, team basketball and team play. On the defensive end, for me, there are non-negotiables. A non-negotiable is everyone has to guard. And you have to guard a certain way. And exactly what you said about, taking away the opposition's kind of primary strength on an individual basis or a team basis. We put a lot of time into our scouting. So the first maybe 6 to 10 weeks of the season, we're really focused on ourselves and what our principles are, and embedding them and instilling them. And then after that, we try and stay true to our principles, but on a week-to-week basis. There's a certain player that likes to shoot the ball from 3. How can we guard that player? There's a certain player that likes to go left hand more than right hand in pick and roll? Can we do that? And these, and that's the little stuff where, for me, there are non-negotiables. That is critical to the game, and defensively, that has its role and it has its purpose for everybody. And I don't care what you say. They're a different level of defenders, but when you're out there with four other guys and you're a defensive, you put a lot of emphasis on the defensive end. Everybody should be able to compete and everybody should be able to play. They should. And if they can't, then, again, coaches maybe have to hold players accountable. Sometimes coaches, they think holding players are accountable or screaming and shouting and, this kind of really authoritative. And sometimes holding somebody accountable can be having a conversation. That player's just went to the middle and he's not meant to go middle. It's something as simple as that. And what's wrong with this situation? Offensively, that's something where each coach will tell you, again, kind of, how they think the game should be played. But, our system is based on ball movement. It's based on trying to get players who are effective in certain situations, get them the ball in those situations. We really, because practice time throughout the season for us becomes challenging, we're in the middle of, today we've just finished our 8th game in 15 days, which is just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So practice time, in terms of getting practice intense and competing, it's very challenging at the minute. So a lot of practice time is very breakdown, tactical and walkthrough based stuff. So if we run we have a basic offensive system that I can't give you the ins and outs to now. But no, we have a basic offensive system that a lot of people, different people have their own system and certain traits, but we try and break down that system, and you're going to get looks from here, you're going to get looks from here. And it is kind of, it's a system where it's a framework for players to play within. Linking it back into kind of what I believe is right in junior basketball, so many players and clubs would teach guys to play a system. I actually was having a conversation with a player of mine yesterday on this, and a club that he came from was the tremendous club for producing junior players, and they used to run a specific offensive system that was based around different types of screens and cuts, and that club felt that was the best way to teach players to read the game. Some drawbacks on it would be that they would only know how to play that system. They only, and then when they go to different systems, it takes a while. So I want junior players to be able to know, okay, well, this is a flare screen and they're chasing. So what do I do? This is a pin down screen and they're switching. What do I do? Because and that's the most important thing for me. So the system that we have is a framework for players to play within, and the amount of times, like I'll just even the word play. Sometimes guys catch it in the post, and what do I? Well, I want you to play. I want you to. Okay, so you've got to the middle and you've drew a double team. There's someone's open. There's a solution there. How do we find that solution? And that's I don't try and overcomplicate it. We try and keep it as very straightforward as we can, in its simplest form. It's an invasion game, isn't it? It's an advantage game that's you're trying to get the best available shot, and that's something that we don't get right all the time. Of course we don't, and that's the beauty of basketball. The fact that you can always improve and you can always, but that is what we're trying to do. Whether it looks like that or not, sometimes who knows? But that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up there, Mark. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I do, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. And if anybody wanted to get in touch with you to find out more about either yourself or to find out more about Northumbria's program, how would they go about doing that via social media?
Yeah, Twitter. Twitter's probably the best way for me. So I'm on Twitter. I think you search my name, Marc, spelled with a C, and Steutel, Steutel. It's probably the best way to do it, and I do get kind of some inquiries on there. So yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so once again, thanks, Mark, for coming on.
Top man, thanks, James.
And for everybody else, this podcast will be aired every Thursday. So until next week, I will see you.